Poštovani gledalci, dobrodošli u N1 intervju. Ono o čemu u proteklom periodu vrlo često govorimo jesu geopolitička dešavanja. Šta će se dešavati između Sjedinjenih država, Rusije, Kine, kako će se razvijati svi ti odnosi i šta će uraditi Bidenova administracija, šta će uraditi Putin, šta će uraditi Xi Jinping, kako doći do vakcina, kako se boriti protiv COVID-19. Jedan od onih koji nam to vrlo dobro mogu kazati je Julian Borger, urednik Guardiana koji živi u Washington DC-u i prati cijelu ovu situaciju. Prošli put kada smo s njim razgovarali, još uvijek je na vlasti bio Donald Trump. Međutim, sada su se na sceni pojavili neki novi igrači, ali i neka potpuno nova situacija. Julian, welcome to program N1.
Good to be here.
Last time when we spoke, we had a totally different geopolitical situation. Donald Trump was still in the White House, and it was about a year out of elections. But now on the international scene, we have a different set of players. Joe Biden is in White House. Angela Merkel is leaving her position. Vladimir Putin is stronger than ever, or he thinks that he is stronger than ever. European situation is not that good. How do you see the situation today in the world?
See, I think I eternally big question. I mean, obviously there is a big change in the White House, just in terms of the readiness of the US president to work multilaterally on big global issues. And we're seeing that obviously in the return to the WHO, the World Health Organization, readiness to work cooperatively on the pandemic. Secondly, probably most importantly on climate change, and the return to the Paris climate change accord, and the appointment of John Kerry as special envoy on that, and a renewal of at least US energy in that sphere. I think that those are the most important changes, whether they will lead to a change in direction on climate change and emissions, yet to be seen, but there was a complete absence of US leadership in those two critical areas, the pandemic and climate change, and you could say that leadership is back. On the other hand, the big problems facing the US and the West in general, in terms of confrontation with Russia and Putin's hybrid warfare, and in terms of a rising China under a autocratic nationalist leader, Xi Jinping, those problems are the same as they were under Trump, and Biden is finding it, just as hard to confront those problems as Trump. I mean, the big difference, of course, Trump had this mysterious kind of love affair with Putin, and a great admiration for Xi Jinping. I mean, the way that Trump approached world politics was that he was this great male leader, and his job was to talk to these other great macho world leaders, and if they was nice to them, they would be nice to him, and things would be sorted out. At least that is over, and we're back to business as usual, but in dealing with intractable problems. As long as Putin's in charge in Russia and Xi is in charge in China, there is going to be rivalry verging on confrontation.
But with Europe, we have now Boris Johnson, who's independent leader. On the other side, Angela Merkel is leaving. Emmanuel Macron is fighting for his political future next year. And we have small bits and pieces of leaders around Europe who are turned more towards east, towards Xi Jinping and Putin.
That's right. I mean, I think the election of Joe Biden gave a sense of sort of relief that this sort of populist wave and the liberal wave in Europe may be beginning to turn, but it may turn out that Biden's win in the US is the kind of anomaly, and this drift away from liberal democracy towards illiberalism will continue, and the rise of far right will continue in Europe. It's really unclear to say right now whether Biden's win is a sign that things are turning around. But I think it does help that there is someone in the White House who is not leading in that direction.
The one element is, Joe Biden well for decades now, since the Balkan times, but can his foreign affairs experience and a Senate experience and sitting on a committee for foreign affairs help him in situations like this to deal with Xi Jinping and Putin and European undivided and divided leaders?
I think it's got to help. I mean, compared to the complete ignorance and lack of foreign policy experience of Trump and his naivety in terms of his implicit trust in people like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, it has to help that you have someone in charge now who has experience and long experience of, confronting the Soviet Union during the Cold War and China. It is really a return to the traditions of US foreign policy in terms of the big emphasis on alliances, both transatlantic and trans-Pacific. That's what we're seeing now, is a sort of restoration of traditional US foreign policy. That isn't, compared to Trump, that often seems like a progressive thing. It's not always such. We've already seen that Biden has been prepared to go against the rest of the Security Council over Israel because of this, importance to him about this old alliance between the US and Israel. He was prepared to ditch all his promises of multilateralism, America is a back, and we'll put human rights at the center of our foreign policy when it came to Israel. And there's a certain amount of disillusion, both on the left of the Democratic Party, but also at the UN, that this promise return to multilateral partner had a big caveat when it came to Israel. So already, in a way, you could say the honeymoon is over when it comes to the US on the world stage.
Can he fix that issue of Middle East with his experience and maybe change of a prime minister in Israel, or Naftali Bennett can be even bigger landmine for Joe Biden than Bibi Netanyahu is?
Yes, I mean, obviously this, if there is a new government, it's not going to change anything much, it seems to me, in terms of Israeli-Palestinian affairs. It looks like, a government of two completely different parts, united only by the desire to see the back of Bibi Netanyahu. And so, I think the expectations of most Middle East observers is it will be consumed with trying to survive in office. And we're not going to see any new initiatives, any new policies when it comes to the Palestinians. And although the Biden administration has promised to give money to rebuild Gaza and to reopen the consulate in East Jerusalem, we're back in the same cycle of the world, international community helps rebuild Gaza, and then there's another upsurge in violence, and the idea of bombs it and levels large parts of it again, and the cycle continues, and the people of Gaza try and suffer all the way through this. I've seen this so many times before. It's hard to expect anything different now with this new Israeli government and with Biden in office.
Now, many have believed when Joe Biden comes to the White House and bring up people who know Balkans very well, that there will be action in the Western Balkans, especially in Bosnia. We know that his Secretary of State is Tony Blinken, who's known in Balkans for decades. But many are saying with all these big issues that we should not expect much, that he will probably leave Balkans to the European Union. And he's coming to Europe just in over 2 weeks to meet with a European leader, but also with NATO leaders. So what we should expect from Biden when it comes to Western Balkans?
I think that's right. I mean, I think it's not going to be a priority project. He would definitely, I think, be left within the administration to State Department. Again, a sort of restoration of the U.S. role of, seeking to confront and contain the separatism of the RS, trying to build common institutions and so on, and an end to sort of the slightly more radical schemes of late Trump era of looking for the possibility of territorial swaps and giving Balkans policy to someone as inexperienced as Rick Grenell. It'll be a kind of a return to the norm. But as with the Middle East, so with the Balkans, the norm was no great shakes. It hadn't made progress in the Middle East. It hadn't made progress on Bosnia, for which you would need a U.S. administration to turn back its focus and invest large amounts of resources and time and bandwidth to the problem. And this administration I do not see doing.
We are getting here new high representative, and that could be Christian Schmidt from Germany. Can that be a change when it comes to Bosnia, to have a German to play strong role, European Union to play some sort of a role, and then to have US to play maybe the stick on side of the carrot when it needed to be?
Possibly. And to be frank, I don't know enough about the individual's concerns to really comment. And a lot may come down to the individuals. But obviously, to the extent to which Germany is engaged, obviously after the US, Germany is probably the most important player. The UK is committed to stay involved and sees involvement as in Bosnia as a kind of benchmark of its continual global important role, which is important for its own self-image. But with as you pointed out, with Merkel on the way out, how focused is German foreign policy going to be? I mean, you need a kind of groundswell of political will in Europe and the US to shake Bosnia out of the post-Dayton status quo. At the moment, I don't see that happening.
What with Russia and China? Could they try to use this part of the world to basically put the finger in the eye of Joe Biden and U.S. administration, and even to provoke European Union? But also, should we or could we expect that the Erdogan will play similar role here in the Western Balkans?
I can imagine all three. Obviously, Erdogan has he has a real presence in Kosovo. You can imagine stepping up in Bosnia. As for Putin, he clearly, it's a low-cost way of messing with the European Union, but actually he's found lots of ways to mess with the European Union. We thought that this at one point that the Bosnia would be where he would try and just create trouble, but he didn't commit much in terms of take any risks and put much money into creating problems with the EU. It's cheap to keep supporting Dodik, but meanwhile he's found lots of ways inside the political systems of the other EU member states. Just look at UK, how easy it was for him to meddle in the UK in the Brexit vote, and so Putin has lots of ways to stick a finger in the eye of the EU. And, I have to admit, I thought that he was going to make, more trouble in the RS in Bosnia in terms of, sending, there'd be more GRU presence, there would be more, Russian training. And he, it seems to me, has decided not to go out so publicly in that way and to invest and to take the political risks that would involve. So, and I think that's probably because he can cause more trouble by misinformation.
Yeah, but he found that space, if I'm not wrong, in Serbia, because he's arming Serbia, he's helping Serbia, he's doing vaccine diplomacy, such as Xi Jinping when it comes to this part of Europe.
Yes, no, that's absolutely true. And obviously with vaccine diplomacy as well, when it comes to Serbia, I think that has been the strategic decision to put the investment into Serbia rather than the RS.
But when it comes to that vaccine diplomacy, we are seeing that the European Union has a lot of problems with vaccines. US is also promising that it's going to do something, but is waiting for something, but others are playing that game to put their influence there. And we heard from WHO for time and time again that Dr. Tedros is complaining that there is inequity when it comes to the vaccines at this moment. How that fight around the vaccines and COVID-19 can influence geopolitical situation in time to come?
Well, I think it's a huge failure of the European Union. The vaccine has been, exposed its weaknesses in terms of organization, in terms of forward planning, and in terms of equity. And the same to a certain extent with the US. I mean, obviously the US has recovered in terms of its own domestic performance in terms of vaccine rollout since Biden's come to office, but they were slow in terms of getting vaccines, shipped to abroad, to partner countries who didn't have the wealth and connections to be first in the queue. And I think the Biden administration missed an opportunity to build on this and to demonstrate this much vaunted multilateralism by being slow to export vaccines and to keep such a large reservoir of their own vaccines before reaching out abroad. I mean, they belatedly realized that problem and are working to rectify it. But I think it was a lost opportunity, especially as, Russia and China were offering those. But, as with many things with Russia and China, an element of that backfired because of the dubious nature or the question marks over the Sino vaccine and the Sputnik vaccine.
Julian, you and your colleagues, you're extensively reporting on COVID-19. One unanswered question here is the origin of the virus. And we know that we have two teams now. One team says it's a natural origin. The other team says there is several hypotheses we need to go deeper and to research deeper. Based on your reporting, but also on your knowledge, which one of these theories looks to you more plausible, or are we in that game which Dr. Mike Ryan from WHO says that this process is poisoned by politics and is not influenced by science?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm obviously no scientist. So, in terms of gauging the theories, I am not in a position, firsthand to make a judgment. And what I would say is that I don't think much has changed in terms of the available evidence, in that I think now, as before, the most likely is that the virus evolved in the wild from bats through maybe an intermediary animal to humans. There are a million ways it could have happened and a million opportunities to do so. And my understanding is now, as before, it is impossible at the moment to completely rule out the possibility that it was a lab accident. And we've had this report in the Wall Street Journal saying that several people at the lab got sick at around that time. that may mean something or may mean nothing. They got sick at a time, flu season, and there's nothing in it. But it is impossible, especially without Chinese cooperation, to get to the bottom of it, to really try and nail the origins. And even before, in outbreaks, previous outbreaks of other diseases, other pandemics, it has been really, really hard to find exact origins. I mean, it's a really difficult piece of detective work. And so in a highly politicized atmosphere, with China being uncooperative and being kind of on the defensive, then obviously it's even harder. And obviously China is not acting in a very confidence-inspiring way. They're being defensive, obstructive, and that might either mean they have something to hide in terms of the lab, or it just means that's what this Chinese government is like. It is secretive, defensive, and obstructive.
Now, Julian, let's move to something what's very close to you and where you are world-renowned expert, and that's war crimes in Bosnia and hunt for war criminals in Bosnia, especially the two big ones, Radovana Karadžića and Ratka Mladića. So let me start with Mr. Karadžić. He's just moved from Scheveningen to United Kingdom. Reports in media say that he's on Isle of Wight, and we know that that's a very notorious prison in United Kingdom. So from your own knowledge, what you can tell us, what he can expect there for the years to come, where he will spend the rest of his sentence?
I mean, I think you will experience, the antiquated nature of the British prison system. It's an old Victorian prison on the Isle of Wight. Not all the cells have toilets. It is going to be a shock after Scheveningen, where it was really state-of-the-art, had been purpose-built, and there were a lot of amenities, and it was comfortable. The Isle of Wight is not going to be comfortable. It's an aging prison population. As the Sun reported that there'll be, there'll be around, aging rapists and pedophiles. I don't know to the extent, how much of the prison population is that category of prisoner. But our understanding from these reports that I can't independently confirm is that the reason why they chose Isle of Wight rather than somewhere else is because the Muslim population of the prison is lower in the Isle of Wight. And for the experience of Karadžić, who was stabbed in a British prison, Wakefield, I believe, that was the big worry, and that was the argument made by Karadžić's legal team against being transferred to the UK. Look what happened to Karadžić. You can't keep your prisoners safe, and the presence of a significant Muslim population inside the prisons meant that there would be a population with at least an possible ideological reason to go after him. And so this seems to be the rationale why pick the Isle of Wight, according at least to these initial reports.
Now, we are expecting sentencing of Ratka Mladić. That's the final appeal judgment, and it will be rendered soon by judges over there. Just prior to this conversation, you told me that you're reading some previous opinions of judges who are judging in this case. So what you have found, and what are your reasonings, what we should or could expect from judges in this case?
Okay, well, the presiding judge in this appeal verdict is Judge Nyambe, Priska Matimba Nyambe, who's a Zambian judge. And what is really striking about her is her dissenting opinion in the Tolimir case. She argued for Tolimir to be acquitted on all counts. She argued that the Srebrenica killings were not a joint criminal enterprise, a conspiracy to commit genocide, but, and I'll quote here from her reasoning and her dissenting opinion, it leads to the reasonable conclusion that it arose out of a small group of individuals operating in an unauthorized and secreted manner. So her, is a big question mark whether she will uphold the guilty verdict on genocide in Srebrenica. I mean, it is striking from reading this Tolimir judgment, her, very positive things she has to say about Mladić. Talking about the infamous Hotel Fontana meeting with Karamans and the Bosnian representatives and the interpreters. And here I can read again from her dissenting view. Contrary to the majority, I, for my part, cannot see any actions of Mladić on the video footage admitted in this case done with a view to humiliating the participants. In fact, Mladić is welcoming, offering comforts to the 8 attendees, such as cigarettes, beer, and sandwiches for lunch. This is a really strikingly positive judgment on Mladić's actions in the lead up to the Srebrenica massacre. So there is a question mark over whether the presiding judge here is going to uphold that genocide finding. She would have to persuade 2 of the other 4 judges to follow her. Whether she can do that also, is very much open to the question. But I thought, if they uphold the verdict of the first trial, but the presiding judge dissents, it's not going to be a good look for the Hague Tribunal. It's going to be a very ignominious kind of end to the whole process if there seems to be, disagreement over whether Srebrenica was genocide and whether it was a planned conspiracy to carry out genocide.
But Julian, we have another case which is ongoing, and that's Simatovic case, and that one could be also important if a final judgment ever was rendered, and if gives inclusion of Serbia in that. So when you look all of this, the final stage of tribunal, how do you see it?
Well, I think, the final chapter has not been written on the legacy of the Hague Tribunal, especially if, the genocide verdict is not upheld by the appeals court. And, let's wait and see with the Stanisic-Samatovic case, which I think is the longest trial in history, pretty much, if you take in all the parts of it. Long delayed, long drawn out, but as you say, is of critical importance because it goes to this very critical issue of Belgrade's role in the atrocities, the mass killings, the genocide in Bosnia. It's something that's long been documented journalistically and by historians and so on. But in terms of standing it up in court, the Stanisic-Samatovic trial is really important.
Another very important element here is what with victims and survivors, and how to show them that they got that justice which they seek for more than 25 years. And we know for how long Karadžić and Mladić were in hiding with help of Serbia's authorities. And we know that still in the Balkans, people are looking for their family members and children and husbands and brothers and fathers. So is there a way to achieve that justice, even if Mladić's final judgment is guilty on all counts, or guilty as he was guilty in the first appeal, and with Radovana Karadžića sent away to Isle of Wight for the rest of his life?
Well, I mean, I think you've got to start from the fact that there will never ever be justice for the scale of crimes committed in Bosnia. You're really talking about, you know, a fair stab at justice, a fair attempt at justice, scraping the surface of justice. And, you know, the thing about the Hague Tribunal, it took an awful long time, but it got there in the end. It got the senior people, it got the top people, it got everyone that was looking for, and the idea was, of course, these other state courts would carry on the work when it came to the sort of middle management of crimes against humanity, that the courts in Sarajevo, Zagreb, and Belgrade would carry on that work. And that, you know, at best is a mixed picture. But when you look back in history, it is flawed. It took an awful long time. The system bent over backwards in the interests of the defendants, but it created an important archive of facts, of witness statements. It put away the leading figures behind the genocide and the crimes against humanity, and you know, it made a reasonable outreach towards the survivors. It didn't forget about the families. It didn't forget about the survivors. And it is an awful lot better than the world has managed when it comes to bringing justice for Syria, for example. You know, depressingly, we may look back at the Hague Tribunal as being the high point of international justice. And since then, the world has withdrawn from this effort to try and global initiative to bring those responsible for the worst crimes in history to account. You know, the ICC doesn't have the teeth that the ICTY had, and it is really at the mercy of, you know, the big powers who aren't even part of it. So, you know, although it had, you know, there were a lot of things wrong with Hague Tribunal, you know, it may be the best that humanity has so far had to offer when it comes to this big issue of how do you hold war criminals like this to account.
Julian Borger, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
Poštovani gledalci, bio je ovo razgovor s Julianom Borgerom, urednikom i novinarom Guardiana, čovjekom koji izvještavao s prostora Zapadnog Balkana, a i autor je knjige Krvnikov Trag, koja objašnjava potragu za ratnim zločincima na prostoru Zapadnog Balkana. Ostanite uz program N1. Doviđenja.